While that's loading, I just want to say thank you to everybody that has come today, and I hope you're enjoying the conference. And in addition to what she said about writing down questions, it doesn't have to just be questions. If you have comments or helpful hints you think that you can share with the others here, please write those down and we can discuss those as well. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about empowerment. I think you can all hear me fine, correct? And it's really about taking charge of your life. You're young adults. You might have an immune deficiency, but how can you make sure that your life is really under your control as you're moving away from your parents? I do have to disclose that I do serve as an advisory board member for a couple of these companies that manufacture the immune globulin. So we're talking about late adolescence, young adulthood. That period of time, it's somebody who's age 18 years to about 25 years of age. And we picked that particular age group because at 18 you become an adult legally and you need to sign things, so you're agreeing to certain parts of your treatment. So there's some developmental tasks that you are supposed to achieve by the time you reach young adulthood. And I don't know if you've ever heard about developmental tasks before, but if you think about a young child, let's say an infant progressing to toddlerhood, they start to walk. That means they move to the next stage. Come on in. We just started. You haven't missed really anything. Okay, please sit down. And there's plenty of seats up in front if you want to come. So just to recap for the people that joined us, we're going to talk about empowering young adults to kind of take charge of their life and managing their disease. And then I just started to talk about some of the developmental tasks that you're expected to achieve when you reach this age group. One of them is self-identity. Who are you? You kind of have firmed up what you've become over these past years, particularly in adolescence. If you remember, as a teenager, you might have been in one particular group and you were labeled a particular type of person. So self-identity is really like, who am I? If I had to describe myself to somebody else, what would I say about myself? And that leads to independence. Totally being self-sufficient, managing your life, managing your disease, and then life choices. How do you choose what you want to be in life? And are those affected at all by your personality, your self-identity, by your disease? So when we talk about self-identity, part of it is body image. Are you comfortable with your body image, who you are? You really have a strong sense of self. I am this. And it's usually all of the things that you've discovered over the past several years have combined to make you one unique person. You might be a little bit of a scholar, a little bit of a creative artist, a little bit of a sports enthusiast. All of that makes you your unique self. But part of that, too, is how do you incorporate your health into that? You have an underlying immune deficiency disease, and I'm assuming you all do. That's why you're here today, right? So incorporating that into your sense of self. Are you comfortable with that? Is it a big part of you? Is it a little part of you? It makes you somewhat different from peers your age, but at some point you have to accept that and say, this is part of who I am. It isn't all of who I am, but it is part. And how do I incorporate that into my daily functioning? How do I make that work for me? Everybody wants to be independent at this age, right? That's the first thing you think of. You turn 18, you say to your parents, I'm 18, I don't have to listen to you anymore. I can do whatever I want. Easier said than done, right? Independence really comes after a period of time. It's a transition. So if you're 18, maybe you're going away to college, that's your first transition, right? You move away to live into a dorm. Are you totally independent at that point? No. You're not quite independent. You might be taking on a part-time job. Now you're spending some of your own money for fun, recreational activities. Maybe you're contributing to your college expenses. Again, it's just part-time. It's not total. You might be taking out a loan. How awful, right? And now you're really learning about becoming independent because you're going to be responsible for the loan. So again, it's transition. You're eager for it. You can't wait for it to happen. But then what about the whole healthcare issue with being independent? Are you ready for that? And that means not just, being responsible for your treatments, administering medications, but just recognizing your disease. When do I need to contact somebody? When am I sick? Can I make my own appointments? Do I know how to talk to the providers, or am I still relying on my parents to do those things for me? It's certainly easier. They've done it for years. At what point do you start to take that over? And then if you want to make decisions about your health care, and I said, again, you're 18 years old. You sign the papers, right? I agree to this. I agree to that. Do you really understand what you're signing? Do you understand your disease well enough to actually have those discussions and make good decisions about what treatments you want? You obviously all know about the IDF. That's why you're here. Do any of you go on the IDF website? Raise your hands if you do. Okay. Maybe a couple. Okay. There's a handbook there. Has anybody ever seen that big handbook that talks about? Great. It provides a lot of helpful information. There is a section in there that actually talks about each age group and what the challenges are with an immune deficiency. It's a lot of what I'm covering today, but in there is this transition skills checklist. So nobody thinks you should go in there and just like check yourself off and say, oh, I've officially, moved into an adult. I'm independent because I can do all this. It's good things for you to think about, but it might be ways that you can actually demonstrate to, let's say, your parents, I am independent. You can trust me to make some of these decisions. Look at all the items on there and say, do I do that? Yeah, maybe I need to do a little bit more work in that area first for my parents to feel comfortable with me taking over my care, and for you to be able to prove to them, yes, I can manage this. I wanted to talk a little bit about the college transition because that's what comes up a lot for somebody your age and things that you have to consider when you're making those choices. Most people want to move away to college. Some people are comfortable staying home. Maybe they'll live at home and travel, to the classes and come back home. But the majority of you leave home. This is your big transition. And you have to think about where you're going to live. Do you want to live in a dorm? Do you want to live in an apartment? If you live in a dorm, do I want a single room? Do I want to live with roommates? You kind of hate to live in a single room because then you're missing out on all of the communication with the new people that are entering your lives. But on the other hand, you have more privacy. Are you ready to share with somebody that you have an immune deficiency and what that means and if you have to do certain types of treatments? It's kind of scary to meet brand new people and then right off the bat say, oh, by the way, I have this and I'm going to have all these supplies and I have to do this weird kind of treatment. So think about that a little bit. And then the other big thing is sharing facilities, bathrooms, kitchen facilities. Any of you in college right now living in dorms, apartments? Okay. Are the bathrooms in the kitchen the cleanest rooms in the house? Right? They're probably the dirtiest rooms. And sometimes you're germaphobe, right? Because you've kind of been beaten into you as you're growing up, stay clean, prevent infections, and then you see these dirty kitchens and bathrooms. How do you kind of work that out with the people that you're living with? What kind of sharing of responsibilities do you take, and do they need to understand what your problem is? Would that motivate them maybe to help keep those areas a little bit cleaner? And then your medical care continues when you go away to college. Where are you going to get it? Are you going to do an infusion in your room? You're going to go to the healthcare facility? Do you make appointments off-site to get your care? Do you travel back home to do an infusion? And I'm kind of making an assumption most of you get some type of infusion, but not all of you do. I understand that, but it still is medications you usually have to take and special precautions. I had a young man who was going away to college, and we kept talking about, when you know where you're going, what's going on, let me know so we can talk about setting up infusions. Sure enough, last week of August, he gives me a call and says, I'm starting college next week. I need an infusion. It's like, really? It's not going to happen that fast. You really think we can do things to make that happen? And that's kind of being independent and taking some responsibilities, thinking ahead. My provider lives here. I'm going several states away. Who's going to be in charge of my infusion? How do I get in there to see them right away? How do I let them know who I am? And I'm sure you've heard the saying, an emergency on your part doesn't necessarily constitute an emergency on my part, right? So if people get those calls from you, they might not act very quick. You're going to maybe be in limbo. You might miss an infusion, put yourself at risk to get an infection. And then if you're going to store your supplies, where? Do they have to be refrigerated? Do you have a community refrigerator? Can you get your own little private refrigerator? Are they secure? Do you have to worry about somebody getting your supplies and doing something with them? Does the college not allow you to receive these types of things? Do they have to be sent to some, central place and you pick them up? So all types of things you need to be thinking about. And then recreation. College, besides study, it's all about activities, right? You meet new people, you have a lot of fun things to do. You want to participate in all of that, and that's great. But along with some of that is those hard choices. What is a smart thing to do? What's not a smart thing to do? And you've all been taught to by various people, probably since you were a very young teenager. These are risky behaviors. Watch out for them. Think about them before you do that. But you always had some level of supervision. When you go to college, in particular, move out on your own, there's no supervision. Nobody there saying, hey, is that really such a good idea? It's up to you to make those decisions. And then you want to think about your immune deficiency. Am I at a higher risk for something because I have an immune disorder? Do I even know the answer to that? What happens if I drink at college or engage in some other behaviors? Your providers are more than willing to talk to you. Hi, come in. About those and guide you. And it doesn't have to be a discussion that you have with your parents present. A lot of times when you're going off to school, I like to have a session alone with the young adults and say, let's talk about all the things that you might come in contact with or choices you might have to make and what your risks are. So advanced education, we talked a little bit about that. You want to pursue it, whether it's college, trade school, some other type of training. Is there any reason why you can't do this? For the most part, no, right? You can probably pursue any academic career that you want to. If you have a question about it, talk to your provider. But I think everybody that takes care of patients with immune disorders, we feel you should pursue your dreams. And we can make modifications or talk about anything that the school maybe could help you with. But in reality, there's very little that usually has to be changed for you to pursue those particular dreams. The same with careers. If you want to work in medicine, healthcare, there's no reason why you can't do that. Now, working in sub-Saharan Africa, infectious diseases down in the swamps, maybe that is not the best thing to do. But again, would we ever tell you not to? And the point again is that you're a young adult, you're going to be an older adult at some point. These are your decisions. You assume the risks as long as you understand them and discuss it with somebody, but nobody wants to prevent you from doing anything that is your dream. Go after it. Pursue it. Then financial independence is a little bit harder than being, physically independent from your parents or emotionally independent from your parents. This comes from a job, right? You have to have a job to get money, to pay for insurance, pay all of your expenses. And that can be difficult. And it can be hard, I think, a really bitter pill sometimes for young adults to swallow, saying, boy, I have to pay this much every month. Maybe my insurance is more expensive than somebody else's because I know that I'm going to be using it. So I pick the plan with the higher premium because the deductible is lower. Or I have to pay this deductible every year. And you can be a little bit angry about that thing. What could I have done with that money instead? But, think about ways that you can get around that. A lot of these organizations and resources can give you tips about how you can get extra money to help defray some of those costs. In particular, if you're receiving immune globulin, they do have these copay assistance programs that can totally cover your deductible, which leaves you a lot more disposable income for all the other things that you want to do. You want to pay for an apartment, a house, a car, trips, those types of things. And then developing adult relationships. At this age, you really start to look for partners or long-term relations, and that also brings its own sets of questions. You're great at forming relationships. You meet new people all the time, kind of friends come and go. You put yourself in new environments where you can meet new people. But then if you develop a relationship, at what point do you tell them you have this underlying disease? And what's going to be their reaction? Are they going to look at you and think that you're not desirable? Or are they going to reject you? That's a real fear that some people have. And I will tell you, for the most part, you're not undesirable, and people don't reject you for that, but that fear is sometimes sitting there and you don't want to take the chance, so you don't bring it up. But if you're going to have a long-term relationship, you're going to have to. And part of that goes back to the independence of, I know my disease, I know how to explain it. If you say to somebody, well, I have CVID or I have XLA, and they're, well, what does that mean? You got to be able to tell them that. And if you're contemplating, a long-term partnership where you might marry and have children, their family's going to start asking questions, real hard questions, and you want to be able to answer those too. Is this something I can pass on? If we get married and we have children, what does that mean? So illness actually can impact your achievement of some of these really important milestones. For the most part, patients with primary immune deficiency don't have a lot of physical changes related to the illness and treatment. So it's not obvious when you look at somebody that they've got a primary immune deficiency, right? Look around you. right? Nobody here looks different to me that I would think that you've got anything going on with you. But even things like doing an infusion, having some lumps there, will people see that? What will they think about that? You might cause you to be a little bit more isolated and withdrawn from people because you're afraid about revealing that to others. And sometimes, as much as you desire to be independent, you still need help from somebody. And that really can impede your ability to become independent if I'm always needing my parents to help me with certain things. But think about it this way. You can be physically dependent to some degree for your healthcare needs, but you don't have to be necessarily emotionally dependent on your parents. You don't have to be financially dependent in all these instances. So think of it in various ways. And unfortunately, sometimes this disrupts your plans, right? You make all these elaborate plans. I was talking to a young girl and had nothing to do with immune deficiency, but needed a surgical procedure. You had plans for what you wanted to do with sports, and now all of a sudden you can't do that anymore. So sometimes life gets in the way. It's common. It is not unique to primary immune deficiency. Talk to your peers. They all have disruptions in their life. Very few people can finish college in 4 years anymore, right? 5 years, 6 years. So think about that. You're still very much like other people. These are common themes throughout adulthood. You're going to deal with this stuff as you move to the older stages of adulthood as well. It's just an expectation. Be a little bit ready for it. And then everybody worries about planning for the future, but you should plan for your future. There's no reason not to expect that you should have a future just like everybody else. So as we talked about, everybody in this room either knows somebody or themselves has a primary immune deficiency disease, which means it's a lifelong condition, right? If it wasn't, we probably wouldn't have the IDF and all of the resources that we have here. But what you might not know is you're really not alone. Your disease is rare. There's not a lot of people who have PIDD, but there's a lot of people who have other chronic diseases, and more than 50% of the people in the world have a chronic disease. So think about people with asthma, diabetes, thousands of people with that. They have to take daily medications. Their life can be disrupted. Sometimes those diseases are life-threatening as well. But again, when you look around the room or you're in school, some other place, you don't know they have asthma. You don't know they have diabetes. And the same thing, them looking at you, they don't know that you have a primary immune deficiency disease. So really, you're not alone. This is probably more common than uncommon. And of course, I work every day with patients, but I can't remember the last time I saw somebody who had nothing wrong with them. So this is more common than you think. And because it is so common, people do a lot of studies on it. What can we do to help people with chronic illnesses to make their life a little bit better? And some themes have emerged when they did these studies. Biggest one probably is it takes a lot of time, right? You're always doing something with your disease. There's periods of time where you don't have to, and some people have more time involvement than others, but it's a big complaint. It eats up time. It can be a burden. It's physically demanding at times, financially, emotionally. It can be stress on the families. And then there's that up and down roller coaster. Some days I have a good day, some days I have a bad day. And you can't always predict when those are going to be, and sometimes that's really disruptive to you. And then financially, we talked about what that can mean for you as well. So, went the wrong way. There we go. So you don't want to just let this stuff overrule your life. That sounds like it can be depressing. You have all of these themes kind of in the background. But I think what you really want to think about is, how can I take my life back? How can I be in charge? That's the whole point of this, is I want to be in control rather than letting the disease control me. Now, some people might laugh at this and think it's not true, but I think it's a really powerful statement if you think about it. 99% of your disease and the management is in your hands and your family's hands. So as a provider, what do? We diagnose you, educate you about your disease, we prescribe treatments, evaluate you, we're there for support, that type of thing. But actually, what happens after that is totally up to you. You can decide, do I want to have treatment or not? And if so, what treatments am I going to take? Do I want to learn about my disease? Do I want to incorporate it into my life? Do I want to change my life based on that? And whether you're successful or not kind of depends how you approach it and what you want to do with it. So what would you do about the time demands? Is there anything that can help you reduce that? And this is where I want some of you to think about, that there's questions afterwards. If you have hints for other people in the room, these are the things I have found that have been really helpful for me to reduce the time I spend maybe in management and care. So if you're on therapy, there's some alternatives. A lot of people in the room, I'm assuming, do you take immune globulin? Most of the people here? Pretty much so? Okay. I don't want to only talk about that and ignore people who might not be on any treatments, but by and large, this eats up the most time out of anything that you do, right? And so some of you might do it weekly, bi-weekly, some of you will do it once a month. And your needs for this and how you're going to do it can change over time. So just because you did it one way before doesn't mean you can't rethink that and say, you know what, my life has changed. I don't think this works for me anymore. Is there some other way I can do that that makes better use of my time? So we preach a lot, when you're getting independent, what I like to do with some of the patients is you're young, you're a teenager, getting ready to go off to college. It's a good time to think about sub-Q infusions if you haven't done it. But again, that only works if doing a monthly infusion somewhere is actually onerous for you. So you kind of have to weigh the options. Some people say, I want to do infusion once a month. I only have to think about my disease and deal with it for a few hours, one day a month. That works for me. Other people say, I can't take a whole day off. I might have to travel somewhere, then I have to sit there. I feel lousy after the infusion. That's too disruptive. I'd rather do the subcutaneous stuff. And we can really be creative, with that. It used to be when the immune globulin first came out, it must be given this way, in this manner, and that has really changed over time. It can be given daily, it can be given every 2 to 3 days in small amounts, you can give it once a week, every 2 weeks. So you have a lot of options there. If you feel like you can't think of what they are, please talk to your provider. They can help you problem solve a lot of that. And then the manufacturers have a lot of phone apps for you. If you want to download some of that, it helps you track your infusions. When you're due for something, it gives you reminders. And they also give you a lot of patient support. The other thing to think about is the time you spend doing other things. So if you have to spend some time every month, every week attending to your disease, is there something else that can free up your time so that you kind of are in balance there? So like shopping, having groceries delivered Amazon, right? All those wonderful things you can do. You don't have to spend time doing that. So think of other ways that you can save some time. And if you need assistance, use the assistance. I don't know if anybody is on the facilitated subcutaneous immune globulin that you do once a month. It's kind of a complicated infusion, right? You have to draw up all of these vials, you put it in a bag, then you have to run it through this tubing, you put it in a pump and program it, etc. I think it's complicated. And you'll thank goodness it's only once a month. But for some patients, they say, that's a lot of work. You can have a nurse come in, do all of that. You can be doing something else. They set it all up. That's assistance, right? Then you get it started, they leave, and you finish it. So that, again, necessarily isn't a negative thing. You can have people do some things for you to make your time more efficient. And then again, plan ahead. Waiting till the last minute usually doesn't mean that you can get what you need to, and it usually puts you behind. And then staying well, all of you know what happens when you get sick. It interrupts everything, right? You miss school, you miss work, you get behind on assignments, and you feel like you're chronically catching up. And truthfully, your age group is not the very best at planning ahead and doing preventive, right? You kind of wait until you're sick, then you deal with it. And again, usually wait till you've been sick for several weeks before you call somebody and say, I am really sick with this sinus infection now. I need something today to help me, and I totally get it, but you aren't going to get well in a day. So anything you can do, and you kind of learn this over time. 18, probably you don't do it, but by the time you're 25, you're more likely to do things like, if I rinse my sinuses out every once in a while, I might prevent a sinus infection, and then I might not get sick, and it might not disrupt everything else that I'm doing. And what about your health status? Again, if you want to be in charge, you kind of know what your health is. Sorry for the little typo here. This HER is actually EHR. But some of you have received care in multiple places. You have complicated histories. I don't know if you've gone to the IDF and looked at that electronic health record that they have, but it's great. You don't have to do it all at once, but if you can accumulate some of your past medical history from various places, input it in there, you can carry it around on your phone. So if you show up somewhere unexpectedly with a health issue, you can pull that up and quickly say to somebody, here is my brief history. They can look through that and understand. I'm sure some of you have gone to like urgent care emergency rooms. What do you have? I have no idea what you have. I have no idea what to do with you. And it even tracks like your medication, so you can say this is usually the medicine that I took. It's helpful for me. It helps out the providers. Yes. Oh, 5 minutes. Okay, I thought you had a question back there. Accessing patient portals, a lot of the places that you receive care now have things like, it's called MyChart or some version of that. You can actually get in there, look at your own labs, your test results. I encourage you to do that. You can make appointments online, you can send information or ask questions of your provider as well. And still have regular visits to the provider. It doesn't mean that you have to show up, every so often. I usually say for people your age group, once a year is fine. You're going away to school, I get it. But you can email me, you can call me, message me. That's still the way of getting your care without having to physically show up. Take your medicines. I don't even want to talk about that. You already know about that. Treating the problems early, we went into a little bit. And this is the other thing that your age group actually does not do well. Healthy living. Okay, who gets enough sleep in this room? One or two. Yay for you, right? But most of the people do not. Who eats great in this room? You're in college, right? Popcorn, pizza, fast food, those types of things. Exercise, you're actually a little bit better about exercise in this age group. But the whole point of this is probably the best time of your life. Maximize how fit and healthy you can be. And these are the things that you need to focus on. I know you probably hear that from your parents as well. But, think about that, gradually incorporate that into your daily living. These things are much harder to fix. The other things I was talking about are easy. The stress of having the disease, feeling isolated, engage with people. If you are uncomfortable sharing your disease or you're a quieter person, you don't know how to talk to people, you can do some of this stuff remotely to kind of ease into it. So go to the IDF website, there's blogs, there's webinars, talk to people, and look around you again. Lots of people have primary immune deficiency. You're really not alone. Don't be afraid to engage with them. Easing the disease burden on your family really is more about becoming independent, but there's resources for your family as well. There's even sessions here caring for the caregiver, so encourage your family to participate in that. A lot of patients with immune disorders do complain of chronic fatigue. Now, it's hard in your age group. Are you fatigued because you're in college doing too much, you have a part-time job, you don't sleep enough, you don't eat right? Who knows, right? But that's part of it. Pace yourself. And that's really, really hard for your particular age group to do. You're motivated, you're hard-hitting, you just keep powering through. But again, think about that a little bit. It's okay if you don't take as many classes as somebody else does. It's okay that you're a little bit late finishing college. Counseling was the one thing I wanted to mention. Don't be embarrassed to get counseling. People with chronic illnesses, again, not just your particular illness, need some type of counseling at points in their lives. They might have some anxiety and depression. It really helps them develop coping skills. How can I get through this? How can I make my life work, incorporating the requirements of my disease? And don't forget all of these fun things. They are stress reducers. All of you probably have something that you can do that you enjoy. Music, exercise. Meditation is really a particularly good thing about reducing your stress level. And you're wonderful. You're great. You're unique. Embrace that. Be happy with that. Okay? All right. So any comments? People want to talk about things they do. That's a problem. Or just comments in general. Feel free to speak whatever. Okay.
For lack of better words, I was undiagnosed for a very long time. In my developmental, such as I would make a week of high school if I was lucky, a year. College, I obviously didn't experience going to campus. But now I work with therapists, whatnot. But in a lot of ways, I still feel very, even though I may be mentally, I can spit out a lot of terminology and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel very almost like teaching my life this thing.
Yeah.
I'm young still, if that makes sense, or not quite.
No, that.
I was also not in narcotics for some other purposes.
Yeah.
And I know my frontal lobe is regrowing, but it was before that I felt that empty space, well, now that I'm an adult.
Yeah, I think that actually is common. And again, it isn't just for your disease. I worked with a lot of patients with other chronic illnesses, and it is very common because you've missed those key opportunities and relationships and dialogue with your peers. And so you didn't share some of the same experiences. And in some regards, you're almost like an adult. You can't relate to some of their more frivolous activities, and that creates that isolated feeling, and that's why it's helpful to have some support groups and access through the IDF, maybe some other contacts that way, coming to meetings, getting to know other people and embrace some of the things that you're really good at. If you have a particular talent, you can start to develop friendships that way. And most adults, as they get older, like 20s and later, they kind of lose some of that more juvenile behavior, and you'll be a little bit more comfortable with that group. But I'm betting other people have had that same experience. Okay, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, I don't know how many people in here do this, but this has been a huge part of my life. I've actually bonded with a lot of people here over it. I found that in the musician community especially, it's really important to just, even if you're not a musician, have music in your life, because it's one of the most calming and stress-reducing things you can possibly do, because if you immerse yourself fully in music, then it's really like therapy. That's why they have music therapy.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. And some patients find that, just listening to music during their infusions is really helpful. It's a way to kind of disconnect from the fact that I have to look at my disease right at the moment. So they kind of, sleep or listen to some music, and then they wake up a little bit more refreshed, feel a little bit more energized and empowered to go on. Okay. Oh, and here's a statement, maybe, or a comment. Check medical laws for the state of college, because some are different. It makes things difficult. So for example, in Florida, you need an in-state doctor for medications. So this is true, and it depends what your infusions are. So if you're getting subcutaneous infusions, that can be shipped anywhere. You can keep your primary provider. I have lots of patients who don't live in my state, and I can still write the orders, and it can get sent there. But if you want to do an infusion, like intravenous immune globulin, they usually have to have a supervising provider and somebody who has privileges at the institution where you're getting it. And so if your previous provider is not able to do that. And so what it means is, if let's say you live in Texas and you're going to go to school in Arizona, you're going to have to find an immunologist in Arizona who's willing to take you on as a temporary patient. They're going to want to see you first before they write any immune globulin orders and supervise you. And then they're going to have to get authorization from the insurance company to infuse you at their particular center. And sometimes this can take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to make all of that happen. So that's kind of the emphasis on planning ahead, so you don't interrupt your treatment over time. Okay. Yes.
Personally, for me, going to college, I decided not to tell anyone.
Okay.
Do as many, normal things, I guess, as possible. So I joined the cheer team. I didn't tell anyone except for my coach. I asked her not to tell anyone, and that, for me, because I don't like when people treat me differently because of it.
Mm-hmm.
That for me was a lot easier than
Yep. Mm-hmm. So where do you live, in a dorm or with a group of people or by yourself?
I live in a dorm, but we have a bathroom that we share only with 4 girls.
Okay. So then nobody sees your supplies or your infusions or anything like that?
I go to an infusion center.
Oh, okay. All right. So then it's right. And again, it's whatever, works for you. And that seems to be, something that helps you out. And other people, feel like they need to share that with others, because it's too visible right there if they're doing subcutaneous infusions and things. So I did have somebody actually who they didn't have the availability of an infusion center, but they went to a hotel like once a month, and then a home care nurse met them there, and they did their infusions there. So, okay, again, very private. Other experiences that people have had, or comments? Okay, yes.
I just wanted to say that I'm kind of the opposite of her, so I can just kind of afford to get on both sides. So I'm really like open about it, and so I go to
Mm-hmm.
I totally understand being like closed off and not wanting to tell people about it. 'Cause that's kind of how I was before. But I think we also do need like educating people.
Right, and it's all about what works for you. Just like there's all different types of ways to infuse immune globulin, there's all different ways to approach that. Does anybody feel like you've had problems with relationships or friendships because of the disease? Okay. Anybody wants to share about that? And okay.
Well, recently, like I'm older and dating now, so I wait for a while to tell people usually, but when I do, I've noticed that people just kind of treat me differently and kind of baby me almost and like look at me differently. I don't really like people treating me differently.
Sure.
I'm kind of, I don't even want my mom really. I kind of take care of my own stuff. And so when people do that, that seems like usually wait for a long time before I tell people. So that I can get to know them and they can get to know that I'm more normal than you think.
Well, you are normal, right? I mean, you just happen to have a disease that somebody's not familiar with. I mean, you probably know other people who have other diseases and nobody thinks twice about that. Although they do kind of treat people with asthma and diabetes a little differently, right? Because you're always worrying about your friend. Are they breathing okay? Is this hard for them? You know, are they acting funny? Are they having like an insulin problem or something like that? So some of that is just concern, you know, for the individual. Okay. Do you get a lot of questions about genetics and, you know, can you pass this on to others? Okay, and you want to share something about that? Okay.
Like one question I get a lot is if I can like super common. And
Yeah.
it's hard because like I've had people like my roommate for a long time like would joke about it and like tell people oh it's not like it's not like don't tell people that are like associated with that because it's not like that. And I've had people like really question me on it and like try to convince me that it is. It's not that. So it's frustrating.
Right. It is frustrating to have people tell you how to manage your disease when you're the one who really knows the most about your disease. What were you going to say?
Well, I've never ever had somebody say that to me, but people kind of lead your life a lot of times when they figure out you're defective. They think that they can't make it kind of cool for you. And my family really doesn't believe at all, like other than my mom, who's been very supportive in my life. Nobody else believes that it's a real disease at all, even despite the things I show them and how many times I tell them I'll take them to my doctor's appointments and they never know.
Yeah, and the hard part is because, like I said, it's not visible. You look at people with an immune disorder, you look like everybody else, you go to school, you can do the normal things. It's hard for them to believe you have it. It's hard for them to believe you don't feel well on certain days because they'll say you don't look sick. And sometimes that's a good thing because you don't want to look sick, but on the other hand, it's a bad thing because then there's nobody believing why you can't do something that day. You're too tired or you're missing school, and they think you're just trying to get out of things. Okay, yes?
My family is fairly, I'm from a family where just turned much farmers, you know, etc. And expect me as well to be very, you know, well, recently, my uncle, who is 61, was talking about me at a family gathering. He didn't understand why I couldn't, you know, hold a computer job. Well, I have super insomnia and things like that, you know. He doesn't know, he's not actually fake. But I went over there and addressed every family member, and I said, look, you know, I need you to understand this. Yes, I am ill, it's fine, but you need to know that you don't have the slightest figment of, you know, you don't know what I'm going through every day. And if you're going to say anything about it, please come to me. You know, you're a 60-year-old man, I'm 33, I don't think that's appropriate. You know,
Right.
as far as, because, you know, it was kind of a gut check because I love normal, like she said, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, to me, normal is a setting on a washing machine, but,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
you get the gist though. And, you know, that really helped me when I confronted them.
Yeah, and that is powerful. And that, again, is kind of this whole empowerment thing, right? You're kind of taking charge. You're not going to let people do this to you, kind of run you over, degrade you. And one of the bigger problems, too, I see with a lot of the immune deficiencies is that whole issue of the chronic fatigue. Because, you are tired. And sometimes you feel better after an infusion. Sometimes, you're just chronically tired. And then people just say, well, they're lazy or they don't try hard enough or it's all in their head type of thing, and that can be difficult. And maybe sometimes your family isn't the best support, out there. What do you want to say?
I have a story of my gram telling people that I had no idea she was doing this. I live in Oklahoma and she's in Corpus. So she told my aunt's friend that I had bubble boy disease, and I don't.
Yes.
We had skid. And this lady looked at me and she's like, why aren't you in your bubble? And I got really mad, and I got really mad, but I told her, like, I don't have skid, like, they're two completely different things. And then I explained it. My gram was kind of like annoyed that I corrected her, but like that night I was talking to my cousin, and my cousin was like, she tells everyone that, and I'm like, who's everyone? And she's like, everyone.
She meets,
So,
yeah.
everyone apparently thinks I have bubble boy disease.
And unfortunately, too, I mean, that's part of the mission, of IDF is trying to get the education and awareness out there so people understand a little bit better about immune deficiency diseases and what they are. So too bad, though, for that part of it. And it's amazing to me what people will say. They're so unthinking, so cruel sometimes. And, I guess part of what you can do with that, too, is to say, you know what, I understand, so I will be more understanding and gentle and kind to others, even if I can't control what some of these people are doing and saying. And I don't have to be part of that. I don't have to stay here, and listen to that. Yes.
Basically, I actually found a lot of friends that have had family with other medical, not in our cases, but in the same way that they had to be treated or whatnot. So whenever I did tell them about it, they're like, I had to actually explain it to them just the way that she was explaining it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like the bubble boy, but I can actually walk around.
Yeah. I don't need a bubble. Yeah.
I don't need a bubble.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's actually good to find people that it's actually cool to find people that have already had at least some sort of medical something happening with them, some sort of medical occurrence.
Isn't it amazing how much better they understand when they've gone through something themselves? Yeah.
So what do you have? And then you have to just kind of loosely explain it in a way. It's just I just get sick easily. Okay.
Right, but then they're okay with that. It's like, I get it. Yeah. Yeah. Did you want to make another comment? Yeah. Yes, right. You have to be an advocate for yourself. Okay. Do you feel pretty comfortable? It sounds like a lot of you are very comfortable advocating for yourself. And do you find it helpful networking? I mean, through the Immune Deficiency Foundation, gives you some resources and support, because again, they'd like to know if there isn't enough of that there for you or enough connections. They're always trying to make things better. So please, comment on any of that. Yes.
When I was diagnosed with stage, so I was born into a family that nobody knew anything about it. When I was a little kid, it was up to 10. I never stayed in anyone's houses. They always had to come to my house. My parents would overwatch me throughout the whole night. So I was literally treated like the bubble boy.
Yes.
And it took so many years before I could actually stay at someone else's house. And my parents would write a list of watch for this. You can't do this. You have to keep a close eye on them. That it was to the point that I felt alone to a certain extent. That instead of music, I found myself in gaming, playing online.
Sure.
Because it would be I could feel like someone totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just stuff like that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's the same thing that happened to me during the Scouts when I was a Boy Scout. And I basically, when we go into Catalina Highway in northern Utah, or just one of these days just Boy Scout, just jamboree or whatnot, we kind of mentioned these, okay, we have to have this, for me, and I'm like.
Makes you uncomfortable, doesn't it?
And
Yeah.
a little bit uncomfortable, but for just how they understood it, they're pretty much
Good. Good. I mean, do a lot of you feel like it's hard to separate from your parents, with all the disease issues and the care and the treatment? Has it been hard to have them let go? Yeah, one person saying yes, others not so much. Yeah, okay. All right. Oh, another comment? Go ahead.
Question, RC Sandy.
Yeah.
Not an outlet, as well for me. However, is it disassociation to a certain degree? I mean, I don't sit there for days telling me, but I mean, is it hiding or is it just coping? Like you said.
I mean, it can be coping. Part of it maybe is like not being in the world of immune deficiency for a while, right? So you can remove yourself from that and play because a lot of gaming is fantasy, right? And some of it might even be like unleashing your anger and frustration, right? With what you do in the game. Oh, I'm really angry. Get that. It kind of helps you dispel some of that, and you're probably a little bit less stressed when you finish doing it. Okay, so any outlet that's productive, like that. So, okay.